Welcome back into the Big Ten Show. Myself, Justin Adams, for those of you that are new to the channel, which would be everybody, considering we don't have a lot of episodes up. So this would be our second or third, depending on when you see this. So we are joined here today with my co-host, Sonny Verma. Sonny, how's it going today?
It's going well. Excited. Just a couple more days to that national championship. It's a lot of fun stuff to talk about.
Absolutely. And Jackson, welcome to the show. Jackson is from the Jacksonian podcast. He is very knowledgeable Alabama fan. I know that might be rare to hear, but he's here to give us a little bit of a perspective from the Alabama side of the team that faced Michigan and go into a little bit of stuff in regards to the game and then some other stuff in the lead up to the national championship that is important of note and interesting. So, Jackson, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing awesome, Justin and Sonny. Thank you for having me on the Big Ten Show. It's an honor.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you taking the time to hop on here.
I appreciate you having me on.
No, you're one of the best follows when it comes to YouTube. You're throwing out content constantly, so it's an honor on our behalf to have you on the show. So, we were also curious, knowing you are you are an Alabama fan, and let's just kick it off right away. That game last Saturday came right down to the wire, but in my opinion, and admittedly, I'm looking at it through the Big Ten glasses, I thought it was kind of clear that Michigan was the better team on Saturday. Now, that's usually not said about an Alabama team. What are your thoughts?
When I was looking at this game, it looked like a toss-up to me, honestly. And, for a moment, before Michigan made that big play on 4th and 2, I was thinking, ooh, it's going to be another big game lost in the postseason for Michigan. So that's what it felt like. But then once we saw some of the big plays in the game-time drive by McCarthy and Corum and Wilson, I was like, Michigan might pull this off.
Yep. And, the biggest test for y'all was the containment or, the dynamicism of Jalen Milroe being the best quarterback that, Michigan had faced. So what do you think was the key to kind of honing him in and containing him? Because it seemed Michigan passed the test with flying colors, defensive line played great. But what do you think it was that you saw specifically that helped them contain Milroe?
Man, it was that running game on defense, and, in the first half where Milroe was getting sacked all over the place, I'm going to tell you right now, that's what really helped Michigan. They put tons of pressure on Milroe. Mm-hmm. That's what really got us there.
Yep.
And we didn't do a good enough job protecting him.
And, a lot of credit towards Michigan and the staff. Like, again, rarely do I see an SEC team kind of be surprised by how physical another team can be. And Michigan's line just seemed like they were kind of overpowering Alabama to me. And I think I don't know if that caught them off guard, but I mean, their strategy of essentially, if they're going to lose to Milroe, it's going to be with his arm. They weren't going to let them beat him with his legs. And, for the most part, especially in the first half, Alabama just seemed like they had no idea what to do. And then, Saban being Saban, he did make some of the proper adjustments in the second half. But again, rarely does this happen. But I think he went up against a staff that is equally as good at making those adjustments. So it was for me, I really enjoyed watching that game because it was kind of like a chess match going on between both teams trying to take advantage and capitalize on the other's weaknesses. And, it's the conclusion to what I thought was the best semifinals in college football.
Yeah, exactly. And with that being said, it was, I would say probably the best day of football, like in a long time, just a matter of the efficiency of how good the games were. We had 2 games and we had 2 excellent games at that. So, what do you think in my opinion, right? Michigan is one of those teams that's just, assert their dominance, impose their will, And the fact they were able to do that against a good Bama team, albeit, Bama's supposed to be quote unquote down this year, but, played well, beat Georgia, was coming off that momentum. So, it can't be understated how well they were playing. But, Michigan, their defense averaging 9.4, opposing points per game, which was the number one scoring defense in college football. With watching that game, do you think that they can do enough to, contain Penix the way they contain Milroe? Do you think if they come up with a similar game plan that would be able to work against Washington as well?
I think if you can put a lot of pressure on Michael Penix, you can be able to win the game. Because, if you look at the defense of Washington, it's a disaster. And I remember at one point we're watching the last bit of the Sugar Bowl, Sean McDonough was talking about how Washington's pass defense is a disaster. And to his point, it's 120th in the nation.
Yep.
So all you got to do is have a good enough passing game, and bam, you can beat Washington.
Yep. And we saw that defense get a little bit exposed in the Texas game. It's another thing that I don't think people are factoring in. The Big 12, Pac-12 doesn't play that good of defense, and the Big 12 doesn't play that great of defense. And a lot of people are looking at Penix as, looking at that as kind of, okay, he's going to be able to go in there and do that to anybody. But of course, a lot of the fans don't watch college football like that. And that was the first game seeing, Penix in action for a lot of people, or just, recency bias factoring in. So I think it's one of those things where people are riding high on that, but it's going to be a whole different world when Michigan comes in, because, they're relying on the deep ball, or they like to utilize the deep ball. And what's the best way to make sure that your cornerbacks aren't on an island, and make sure your cornerbacks are in the best position to succeed? And it's going to be the pass rush. So with that coming out of the national championship, or the playoff game, I almost think that's more important to what we're going to see from the game than the Penix performance, because I think, the defense is going to be the stronger of the two. And I think it's going to kind of negate Penix. So I don't think enough people are factoring on the defense and taking that away. A lot of these casual fans, because they see the offense and they like to see the big offense, and they like to see the highlights of him throwing the ball deep. But the defensive highlights aren't as sexy. So do you think that factors in a little bit to a lot of what we're seeing with the general feel for the game? Because we'll get into our predictions in our episode, Sonny, and then we can get into just a little bit of Jackson's here. But do you think that factors into the public kind of view and how people are looking at this game overall and the potential outcome?
Yeah, I think a lot of the general public is really excited about that offense. To your point, Washington is first in passing yards for the season, and, they're 10th in total offense. That's pretty big right there.
Yep.
But they're not really thinking about how exciting defensive ball games can be. So if Washington was to win it all, they'll be like the team with the worst defense that's ever won it all, surpassing 2010 Auburn.
Yeah. That's a big mountain to overcome.
It's tough. I know we talk about Texas not being a Big 12 team, and so not coming in with the best defense. And in the secondary, you're absolutely right. But if you look at some of the stats and the analytics, their defensive line is arguably the best in college football. And that defensive line didn't touch Penix once in that playoff game. So that's why, Jackson, I'm not sure if you know this, Justin's leaning towards Michigan winning. And I think my pick right now is going to be Washington, is because they seem to be having some sort of magical season. The difference is obviously going to be whether the Michigan secondary is a lot better. Will Johnson, those guys are going to give Penix a tough time. Absolutely. But Penix, he's like a magician. Like he gets away from tackles, gets away from would-be tackles, and throws it in the tightest spots that you're going to find. And for me, it's going to ultimately come down to, do I think Washington will get to 30 points? I do. Am I confident Michigan can get to 30 points? That's going to be the tricky part, because all of a sudden, if Washington gets the ball first, they score immediately. and let's just say there's a 4-and-out on the Michigan side, and Washington put 10 on the board. Now, all of a sudden, the way Michigan's path to winning is just to grind it out, give it to Edwards, give it to Corum, have JJ make the plays. Now you're going to put the game in JJ's hands. And is he ready for that spotlight the way the opposing quarterback is? I don't know.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And speaking of the offense that transitions, I'm apparently, again, can't talk, over to Ryan Grubb, and, pursued by Bama, pursued by Texas A&M, but, ultimately stayed. So, your perspective on that, and what do you think was, the thing that kind of made him kind of hang out there with, especially with as much, money as the A&Ms of the world and stuff like that can pay. So what do you think was the biggest thing that set him over?
Well, like last year when he was asked whether he wanted to be the next OC at Alabama, I have a feeling he thought to himself, I had some fun with those guys at Washington in 2022.
Yeah.
Let's run it back.
Yeah.
Let's try to get that Pac-12 title and then some.
Yeah. Yeah. So you think more so short-term looking, but also like maybe, he sees something there at Washington that they can build off of. And of course, Washington, they can build a team there that's sustainable, of course. I don't know if necessarily it will be at the top, every single season, just because the Big Ten is going to be so extremely difficult to win in. Yeah, it's going to be rough next year. But yeah, seems like a little bit of he wanted to kind of just go attack this and get one, and it's worked out well, as you mentioned, number one offense in college football. So,
and you also got to give credit to Jim Harbaugh and Kalen DeBoer. Like Kalen at this point, like his trajectory is just skyrocketing up. His results have spoken for themselves. He, as an underdog, he's one of the best coaches you can find. I just think, both the Michigan staff and the Washington staff, that locker room has built some sort of culture where everyone, and this includes the players, really seems to have, believed in the message, believed in the culture of their program, where it's to the point where it's not easy just to leave just to chase a higher dollar. Like you really believe in the message. You're talking about it to the players and you believe it. And so you want to see it through to the end. And, all credit to Jim Harbaugh and DeBoer for that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Kalen DeBoer, has done a tremendous job over at Washington. He's done tremendously. I mean, I honestly forgot for a little bit that Washington even had a really bad year in 2021. They've been that good in 2022 and this year.
Just another outstanding coach to add to the Big Ten Conference.
Exactly. And speaking of the last time, these two teams met in a very, very important game, 1991, the Rose Bowl, number 2 Washington versus number 4 Michigan. They're going for their straight second Rose Bowl title. So it's kind of bringing us back to that game. And we talked about that a little before the show, but yeah, Jackson, not old enough to have watched that game myself either, but, Jackson, we talked about a little bit before the show, but Jackson, do you remember anything from that game when you weren't born yet?
No, but I watched the bits and pieces of the highlights of it.
Yep. And
I am the oldest one here on the panel, and I was about 8 years old watching that game. And 8 years old, watching college football, something I knew nothing about. I just liked Washington's purple uniforms, and I remember just kind of cheering for them then, which is actually funny now that I think about it. Like Washington was probably my first favorite college football team before I really even knew what college football was. So, maybe I'm just riding, maybe it's my heart telling me that Washington's going to win this on Monday.
Yep. And just in case y'all are wondering, final Washington 34, Michigan 14, if that's a sign of things to come. Michigan actually only had 133 yards passing in that game and 72 yards rushing. So offensive explosion from Washington in that game for a total of 281 yards. So yeah, I think we might, see a little bit more than that in this game Saturday. So, Jackson, anything else on the game that you wanted to talk about, or anything like that before we move forward?
Well, I will say I do kind of wonder what will be happening with Harbaugh afterwards, because I know people have talked tremendously about whether he's going to go to the Chargers or he's going to go to the Raiders.
Yep.
I mean, we don't know what'll happen, because I know he's wanting that shot at a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
He almost got it at the Niners. So he's definitely going to want to brag at the family dinner table.
What would you
be
guys
like,
do?
hey, I won up John this year. Am I the best son?
What would you guys do if you're Jim Harbaugh?
I think
that's a good question.
I think it depends. I would, if I had this team right now, and it would also depend on, of course, money, the numbers and the figures. But Harbaugh's got so much money, it probably doesn't matter. But I think it comes down to whether they win this game or not, whether I would, because I mean, when you're inching closer and closer, if you're this close, it's almost like that little bit of pool is like, I just want to get one, and then. But then if he doesn't get it at the same time, it's like there's no guarantee, especially with the Big Ten getting tougher, that he's going to get back there. Does he risk hurting his legacy a little bit and leaving with like a 9-win team when he could, So honestly, I would think it would depend on that, but probably the safest bet would be to just go ahead and take the spot in the NFL, in my opinion.
In Big Ten country, SEC country, you can get in the 12-team playoff at 9-3. That's for sure.
Yeah, but I still think that version of Michigan and that version of Harbaugh, it's going to be very hard for them to win a 12-team playoff, let alone the Big Ten getting there. But the 12-team playoff is also going to be a little bit more difficult. A lot more difficult than the current playoff structure too. So
I just think if Jim wins this national championship on Monday, there is no higher mountaintop. He's had 3 years in a row of dominating Ohio State. Now, if he wins the national championship with Michigan, all he can do is win it again.
Yeah, but if he wins, he's got to be out.
That's not going to be easy. That's not going to be easy. 4 years ago, the fans were ready to fire him for winning 9-10 games a year.
Yep.
So, again, if I'm Jim and I win this national championship on Monday, I think he hired, wasn't that news that he hired an agent who's supposedly like a big NFL guy?
Someone who represented Tom Brady. I remember looking at that from Dolph Kleeman on X.
Something like that. So I wonder if he's kind of got his eye. I mean, I think it's obvious to say that he's kind of got his eye towards the NFL. I mean, we've all witnessed the last couple off seasons where his name is mentioned so prominently, but I just think it's only downhill.
Yeah.
If he wins on Monday.
Agreed.
Well, especially he had his eye on the Vikings, in the offseason before Kevin O'Connell became the head coach 2022.
Yep.
So that's another one right there.
Yeah, I think we've already seen the Harbaugh, I want to run it back, moment. I don't think we're going to get another one of those, especially with all the cloud over the Michigan program. Kind of like you said, Sonny, I think, and I'm sure Jackson probably agrees, if he wins this, especially, he's got to be out. So, and even if he doesn't, he probably has to lean that direction. So,
Jackson, I'm curious, talking about, what Harbaugh is going to do. You as an Alabama fan, this is the longest an Alabama team's gone without winning a national championship. Pretty much, I think, since Saban has taken over. What are the vibes down there with the Crimson Tide?
I think, we got ourselves another shot. It's just, I don't know what 2024 is looking like. That it's kind of a nervous wreck. I mean, this isn't like the 2009 team, 2011, 2012 teams. This is a whole different Alabama team. And the last few years of Bama, we have not been doing so hot. We've looked pretty undisciplined, although we're more disciplined than we were in the first half of the season.
Yep. Is Milroe going to be your quarterback next year?
Oh, yeah.
Grand scheme of things, though, this is the last question, and I'll bring us home. conference-wise, right? This is the Big Ten show. So Big Ten versus SEC, right? What is the SEC outlook on the Big Ten in the arms race there? And, the SEC widely regarded as kind of, the king for a while, dominating the national championships and the rankings and stuff like that. And the Big Ten, of course, is right up there nowadays. And then the big network TV deals, the Big Ten seemingly has the better deal with CBS, Fox, and NBC, and ESPN, of course, taking on the SEC. So what is the overall feel in the SEC kind of world and fan base in regards to kind of the arms race of the conferences?
Well, I will say it just kind of feels like, we're in a competition with two behemoths where everybody else is just kind of like, are we gonna get a piece of the pie, get a little piece of this pizza here?
Yeah.
Because I mean, this one of the things that's great about this year's national championship is that this is the first one without an SEC team, and ironically, the first national championship of the 4-team playoff era was between a Big Ten team versus a Pac-12 team. Now, ironically, that's going to be a Big Ten game in next year.
Yeah, it really seems like we're living out the whole. It's like Godzilla versus King Kong, and the rest of the conferences are just the humans watching these two titans go at it.
Exactly. Soon to be two super conferences, as we kind of alluded to before. So, all right, Jackson. Well, I really appreciate you coming on here, taking the time to join us and give your thoughts overall. So, before we sign off, anything else that you want to put out? Anything going on over at the Jacksonian? By the way, links will be in the description to Jackson's, socials and as well as his channel. So, go check that out. But anything going on over there you want to put out to the people?
Well, I mean, yesterday morning I pre-recorded episode 24 of the Jacksonian, and it's right here on @JacksonJohnson979 on YouTube. And you can also check on my pinned post on Twitter/X, where I have on Derek Johnson, the host of Locked On Jayhawks, where we talked a lot about Kansas football and Kansas basketball. And, we talked a little bit about the Kansas-Missouri rivalry as well. And we even threw in a little joke about how LeBron needs some Kansas point guards to get to the NBA Finals.
Yep.
I didn't know that was a running joke till yesterday. So
I didn't either. So, but
I learn something new every day.
I am a Nebraska football fan, so.
And I will say my prediction for this national title, I got Michigan winning it 31-28. And I think Harbaugh is going to choose between either the Raiders or the Chargers. After this game, he'll just be like, my work is done. I conquered the Natty. And this university's in good hands, and I'm going to let Sharon Moore take over or Jed Fish take over.
Bring a defense to the Chargers. That's really
All
right.
Don't let that Spanos team run it, because I mean they're just awful.
Yeah, they're terrible. They're terrible. All right. Well, again, thank you for checking out the Big Ten show. We are going to be bringing you a lot more content. We're going to be pumping them out. So if you are a fan of the Big Ten, we will probably touch on your team and anything that happens in the Big Ten, any breaking news and stuff like that. If you haven't, you want to watch our reaction to the Kyle McCord news, we had JR from the Big Ten Huddle, our resident Ohio State expert, on. So you can go check that out. But outside of that, thank you for joining us here. Please consider liking and subscribing, and that'll do it for us. So peace.